welcome to Words for the Journey, words of faith, hope, and love for the journey of life and the journey of faith. And really thankful again I'm joined by Harriet Asselstein, a member of our church community, and we're talking about poetry and really the connection that Harriet has had with poetry in the last number of years. Can you tell us how that started or when that started? Were you quite young when it started, or?
No. I actually had no connection to poetry. It wasn't really on my radar. I wasn't really interested until about 15 years ago when I started tutoring high school students in English and literature. And part of that meant I had to prepare them for the English provincial in grade 10 and in grade 12, also IB English and literature. And I had to prepare them to write analysis of poetry. And first of all, I had to give myself a crash course on poetry and learn about metaphor and sound devices, assonance, and all that kind of stuff. And then how to analyze poetry and to teach my students how to do that. And I found that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed engaging with the poems and teaching the students. Secondly, often my students would come to me and say, I have to write a poem, a sonnet or a ballad or something like that, and it's due tomorrow. And so we would put our heads together. I always tried to get them to give me a topic, and then we would try to come up with something that they could work off of. Sometimes I would do a lot of the work. So I've written poems about race cars and hockey and boyfriends and things like that. Some of them pretty good, but I found out that I really kind of enjoyed the whole process. And in the last thing that works into the story is actually because of you, Pastor Yo.
Oh.
Yes. I started to write poems, just little poems that would tease my brothers or just some nature things or whatever, family things, some fun things. But remember we used to have the Nelson News way back in the day? A little newsletter.
Barely remember that.
A little newsletter with news about our church community. And they were asking for poems. And I was thinking, okay, I can write some poems, but I can't write Christian poems because they're too sentimental, too sappy. To be honest, I never really read Christian poems. And I found out since that there's some fantastic, amazing Christian poets. But, at the time I thought, no, I can't do that. And then one day, it was December, my birthday actually, and you were doing a sermon series on Revelation at the time. And no, I was home alone. It was my birthday. I was feeling really unloved. Everybody was gone. My sisters-in-law usually take me out for lunch, but none of them could make it. And I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I was doing my devotions, I'm not sure, maybe I wasn't, but suddenly I got an idea for a poem based on Revelation, on what you were preaching.
Oh.
And, it really literally poured into my head. I grabbed a pencil and paper and I was just scribbling things down and I was just going, thank you, Lord, thank you, Lord. And I got about 2 or 3 verses that just came so quickly, and in a number of days later I was able to craft it into a poem. And I think it was a gift from God, and also maybe he was telling me that I could and I should do this. So
Okay.
it's never happened quite like that again, where I've gotten almost a whole poem, but often something will just jump into my mind, and I'm able to go with it. And Stump at Keha Beach. Burrowed in the beach, centuries wring your sand-scoured skin. Your blanched lap cradles my legs. Limbs lopped off by chainsaws lay bare your infant heartwood. Where are they now, your bones? Ripped into planks and pilings, or tumbled into the tree graveyard beyond the stream, shrouded by sleek salal bushes. You watch as ponytailed backpackers trudge out of the forest, holding up phones to capture a second of sea. Tents bloom on the beach. Couples brush their teeth in tandem, arms piston in unison. The surf swallows their spearmint spit, rain erases them. And you are left with the hollow knocks and clicks of gray whales under the booming surf. Bears slurp flesh from giant barnacles. Ospreys streak into the waves, struggling with their catch to the cedar crest of the cone you once dropped.
Thanks for reading that. That was great. So Harry, I guess I'm wondering, why poetry, or what's the connection with poetry? Why do you write the poetry you do?
First of all, I want to shine a little spotlight on the Lord, on where I see Him in my life, in creation, in other people, possibly I want to use words, I want to use poetry just to show a small piece of our experience with God. Second of all, though, what I really enjoy is the crafting of the poem. Once I have the idea and I've jotted down a bunch of ideas, I really enjoy the process of using metaphors, sound devices to really make the poem pop, to hopefully, to touch people on a visceral level, so that they can read a poem and think, like that's my goal. I don't know if I ever really accomplish it, but.
Okay.
I just want to read this one quote from Lucy Shaw from her book, The Angles of Light. She can explain it so much better than me, why poems are important and what's so great about them. She says, we all long to find meaning in our lives, and a poem mysteriously helps us to make the connections, to pull things together, to shine light on things from a fresh, surprising angle, and thus create a richer, larger picture from the small brush strokes of specific detail. Poets create a significance. I think that poems help us understand things on a deeper level. Sometimes you have to slow down. You have to read a poem several times, sometimes to really try to understand them. Not always, but sometimes. And I've read poems. I remember just recently I read a poem 3-4 times. I didn't really understand it. I didn't quite understand what the poet was trying to say, and she's one of my favorite poets. And then the 5th time I read it, I suddenly got it.
Oh.
I suddenly understood what she was saying. And, it's sort of like a aha moment, and you can suddenly see a little bit deeper. And I find it's the same with the Bible. It has really taught me how to read the Bible. Well, literature in general, like especially literature from, pre-1900s. You have to think, you have to read it a number of times, and then you can get deeper into it, you can understand it. And so it's really helped. Reading poetry, reading literature has really helped me to read the Bible in a different way, in a much more rich, rewarding way.
Is there a particular book you read, like a novel or a poem, that helped you? Can you think of a moment where you were reading and then that helped you read the Bible better or connect with the Bible better? Or is it just sort of the general experience?
Yeah, the general experience. Again, with my students, having to understand the poem before I could explain it to my students, I would have to really read deeply. And so that's taught me how to read the Bible. Instead of just glossing over everything, trying to understand what is the author trying to say. And the Bible is full of poetry as well, recognizing that and trying to understand what are the metaphors saying about God, about us, about life. So
good. How about people who are watching who maybe think, I've had something of that, or I've had experience, I want to write something, I want to write poetry, but I just don't know where to start. I don't have the words. I'm waiting for that moment for something to connect with me. Or I am writing, but I need some encouragement. Is there something you could say to help people who want to write poetry to start or do it better? Or?
I think read a lot of poetry. That's what helped me, reading poems with my students, the poems in the provincials, and just enjoying them. And then, I think reading a lot of poetry. There's a lot of good books out there about how to write poems. Recently, I picked up one, How to Write a Poem Based on Colin Sky. I don't know, he's a singer. I forget his name. I can't. But it was written by one of my favorite Christian poets, Tanya Runyan. And that book has helped me a lot in learning how to craft a poem properly. I had to go back and all my poems, I have about 40 or 50 poems, and the ones for that book I had to change a few things, take out a few, things that were more didactic or adjectives and make things a little more mysterious. I had to change some things. So that's been really, really helpful. But yeah, there's a lot of good resources out there. But the main thing is to read poetry.
Okay. Maybe one final question, at least for this episode. I've been reading a book called The Age of Atheists. It's kind of a history, the last 150 years or so, different people who no longer believe in God, trying to live a life without God. And so a number of them have turned to poetry as almost like, I would say, a kind of religion. There is no God, but we have poetry. And I found that fascinating. I've not had, personally, I like poetry, but I've not had that connection with poetry that these people are talking about. But can you connect with what they're saying in terms of, oh yeah, I can see why people would have that religious experience in the poetry? Is it that powerful sometimes for you or for others, or?
I think so. I think, I've read some amazing poems that just get right to the heart of what it is to be human. I mean, Shakespeare's like that. One reason that he's been so popular all these years is because he really understands human nature. Plus, he's an amazing poet. But I think it gets right at the heart of what it means to be human, and you can connect really well with the poet, with the speaker, actually, of the poem. And yeah, if there's no God, then don't they say sometimes the humans are gods?
Well, that's also one of the things in the book. I mean, that's another. Yeah. But I was struck by that. The power of poetry for some people, in some sense, takes the place of the divine. Yeah. It is that powerful for people. So, Harriet, thanks for joining us for this episode on Words for the Journey. Words for the Journey. Thank you as well for being here for this episode.